Keep silent. God from God is no longer. Hold vigil. Light from light has been extinguished. Be convicted. True God from true God has been judged to be false and punished. Gather together. One being, begotten, not made, has been broken apart. Dear friends, wherever and however you find yourself this evening, grace and peace be with you. You might have recognized phrases from these opening words as coming from the Nicene Creed, ancient declarations about Jesus. God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. But these are paired with hard words. No longer, extinguished, judged and punished, broken apart. Good Friday is a raw invitation to consider hard things, to imagine God's own self in Jesus suffering and dying, to imagine God's own self crying out in God forsakenness. It's challenging, but it opens up to something which I believe is beautiful, even in a counterintuitive sort of way. We often want to make our Good Friday meditations resolve quickly into our Easter hallelujahs. But it's worth remembering that we are called to go through Saturday first, to sit with the unresolved of it all, to sit with the possibility that the story ended here. Perhaps we do so as a practice to grow in empathy for the situations in our world in which hope is not guaranteed in two short sunsets, and perhaps admit that there is such that exists within us as well as out there. Good Friday challenges us to bring into our understanding of what it means when we speak of God, alongside beauty, love, peace, shalom, to put the word suffering, pain, hurt, and loss. God as inherently suffering. It's an odd faith confession. But a suffering God, that kind of God, is not only found in beautiful sunsets, but in hospital gurneys. Not only in stunning works of art, but in exhausted healthcare workers, empty at the end of a long shift. A suffering God reflects so much that is hard to reconcile with our Easter hopefulness, so much in our world and even with our own hearts that doesn't feel like it gets tied up like neatly folded grave cloths lying in an empty tomb. A suffering God is not absent in our hardest moments, and the suffering God suffers alongside and within, individually and collectively. A suffering God makes a lot of sense for so many realities of human existence. And perhaps For the last year, a suffering God has been more apt than at other times in many of our personal experiences. Tonight we gather for the second of our 3 Holy Week services. We will gather again on Sunday morning, and tomorrow an e-announcements with the liturgy for Sunday's service will be sent out, and it will be posted here on Facebook as well. If you have a candle in your space, we invite you to leave it unlit. There's a typo at the beginning of our liturgy that invites a candle to be lit, that calls for a bowl and the elements of communion, but there are none of those things tonight. This is the one service of the year in which we do not light a candle to be with us in our worship. There is no cloth on the communion table. You can't see it, but there are no banners hanging on the walls. It's not to be overly somber or macabre, but we do so to increase our capacity to sit with lament, to hold on to the unresolved notes in our song of faith, in hopes that we might better embrace them in our own lives and in our world. Tonight's service will end organically, so I will take a moment now to thank you for coming and to express our hope that you will find this service meeting you where you are at. For dear friends, though we are not together, also we are not alone. Thanks be to God. Let us pray together. This evening we gather to remember and give thanks for Jesus the Christ, one who knew human joy and sorrow, yet also one in whom we discover God. We give thanks for his life, how he healed, forgave, and brought hope. But we also gather to remember his death, to remember how those in power, feeling threatened by him, conspired to kill him, how he was betrayed, denied, and abandoned by his friends, how in his death he bore sin, grief, and suffering of the world. We give thanks for Jesus the Christ. He lived for all beings. He died for all beings. This is why we gather. This is why we worship. Thanks be to God. God grant us simplicity of faith and a generosity of service that gives without counting the cost, a life overflowing with grace poured out from the one who gave everything, that we might show the power of love to a broken world and share the truth from a living word. God grant us a simplicity of faith and a yearning to share it. Blessed be, and Amen.
Crucified.
When they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, "You will all become deserters, for it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered.' But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." Peter said to him, "Even though all become deserters, I will not." Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this day, this very night, before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said vehemently, "Even though I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all of them said the same. Jesus prayed in Gethsemane. So they went to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took with him Peter and James and John, and began to be distressed and agitated. And he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and keep awake." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, "Abba, loving God, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." He came and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not keep awake 1 hour? Keep awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." And again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And once more he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to say to him. He came a 3rd time and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? Enough, the hour has come. The Son of Man, the human one, is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let's be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, and with him there was a crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. The betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." So when he came, he went up to him at once and said, "Rabbi," and he kissed him. Then they laid hands on him and arrested him. But one of those who stood near drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to them, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were a bandit? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled." All of them deserted him and fled. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They caught a hold of him, but he left the linen cloth and ran off naked.
There was no other good enough to pay the price of sin. His death has opened wide the gate of heaven to let us in. Oh, dearly, dearly has he loved, and we must love him too, and trust in his redeeming blood, and try his works to do.
They took Jesus to the high priests, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death. They found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another not made with hands.' But even on this point, their testimony did not agree." Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But he was silent. He did not answer. Again the high priests asked him, "Are you the Messiah, Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man, the human one, seated at the right hand of power, and coming with the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" All of them condemned him as deserving death. Some began to spit on him, to blindfold him and to strike him, saying, "Prophesy." The guards also took him and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls, the high priest, came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she stared at him and said, "You also were with Jesus, the man from Nazareth." But he denied it, saying, "I do not know or understand what you are talking about." And he went out into the forecourt, and the cock crowed. And the servant girl, on seeing him, began again to say to the bystanders, "This man is one of them." But again he denied it. Then after a little while, the bystanders again said to Peter, "Certainly you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." But he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know this man you are talking about." At that moment the cock crowed for the second time. Then Peter remembered that Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you will deny me 3 times." And he broke down and wept.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they
my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me, from the cry of my distress? Oh my God, I cry out in the daytime, but you do not answer. At night also, but I get no relief.
My God, why have you forsaken me?
But you are the Holy One, enthroned upon the praises of Israel. In you our ancestors trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. They called to you and you rescued them. In you they put their trust and you did not disappoint them. But I am a worm, less than human, an object of derision, an outcast of the people. All those who see me laugh to scorn. They curl their lips and toss their heads, saying, "You trusted in God for deliverance. If God cares for you, let God rescue you." But you are the one who took me out of the womb. You kept me safe at my mother's breast. On you I have depended from my birth. Even from my mother's womb, you have been my God.
My God, why have you forsaken me?
Do not be far from me, for trouble is close at hand, and there is no one to help me. Many bulls encircle me, strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open their wide mouths at me like ravenous, roaring lion. My life pours out like water. All of my bones are out of joint. My heart has melted like wax within my breaths. My mouth is as parched as dry clay. My tongue clings to my palate. I lie in the dust of death. Dogs surround me. The wicked hem me in on every side. They bind my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones while they stand staring, gloating over me. They divide my garments among themselves. They cast lots for my clothing.
My God, why have you forsaken me?
As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Judeans?" Jesus answered, "You say so." Then the chief priests accused him of many things. Pilate asked him again, "Have you no answer? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further reply, so that Pilate was amazed. Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to his custom. Pilate answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Judeans?" For he realized it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the king of the Judeans?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole cohort. And they clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. They began saluting him. "Hail, King of the Judeans!" They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. Last night, we joined in a meditative moment of hand washing. Remember Jesus washing his friend's feet, a tender yet radical act of service, a call to us to likewise engage bodily in service to our hurting world. Tonight, we see water again. We see washing again. But this time Pontius Pilate, from his position of power and privilege, unwilling to do the harder thing, washes his hands. Not an act of involving himself with the healing and the hope of others, but to abdicate his responsibility. So often we look at the suffering of our world thinking, this blood is not on our hands. But the closer we look and listen, the more we understand how the suffering of the vulnerable is so tied to the comfort of we who live in abundance, or at least how our willingness to accept the poverty of those in need of the basics of bodily protection or safety allows so much suffering to continue. Perhaps one of the learnings we might open ourselves up to again as we ponder the story anew is how we can be simultaneously, moment to moment, Jesus from Maundy Thursday, offering our hands in acts of service to the world, while at the same time, in some situations, we play the role of Pilate, reluctant to look more closely, reluctant to listen more deeply, out of a fear that we might implicate ourselves and find ourselves able to address the suffering of another.
Were you there when they pierced him in?
It was 9:00 in the morning when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Judeans." And with him they crucified two bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads, saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, let the King of Israel come down from the cross now so that we might see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. At 3:00, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he is calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah will come and take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was God's son." There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James, and the younger, and of Joseph, and Salome. These used to follow him and provide for him when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. When the evening had come, and since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself waiting expectantly for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked him for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate, wondering if he were already dead, and summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he had been dead for some time. When he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the body to Joseph. Then Joseph brought a linen cloth, and taking down the body, wrapped it in the linen cloth, and laid it in a tomb that had been hewn out of a rock. He then rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where the body was laid.
Come, Lord, to
so many of us know well, perhaps too well, how the story resolves. We know that the stone will be rolled away. We know that the grave clothes are neatly folded and abandoned. The world around us beckons us forward into thoughts of spring and new life. The sun shines longer, feels brighter. The sounds of birds is becoming more plentiful. Green is emerging from underneath where the suffocation of snow and ice was just a little while ago. Sense of wet grass and fresh growth about to bud. For while we know that the tomb of the story will be empty on Sunday, we still face a world looking at a situation whose end is unknown. Our communities in many ways mirror the stripped altar, the absent banners, the stark cross and crown of thorns. Can we sit with this for a while, in the unknown moments before the dawn of Easter, in the fear, in the uncertainty of not yet knowing what is next? Can we sit with God crying out to God's own self, "Why have you forsaken me?" Perhaps in so doing, we might learn to sit with that cry in our own lives, in the lives of others, and indeed in the life of the world, in all the places we'd rather not confront it. Let us take a moment and allow it to come to our minds. All of that about which we wonder. Has God forsaken that place? Has God forsaken those ones? Has God forsaken me? In our own hearts, we name these with fear and trepidation, with hope, just yet a shadow. For we have opened ourselves to the story of the crucified one, arms stretched out across the chasm of fear, pulling factions into his own broken body closer to his pierced heart, so that this planet of pain may one day claim as its own the love flowing out from that sacred broken heart. Pull us in, Spirit of the living God, into the heart of our hearts, that we might all, once and for all, lay down our arsenals of fear and take up our tools to build the kingdom of God for the sake of all creation, in life, in death, in life beyond death. God is with us. We are not alone. Thanks be to God.
Caritas et amor Deus ibi est, congregavit nos in unum Christi amor, exultemus et in ipso et